Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Stranger Things Season 4, Episodes 8 and 9. They are called Papa and the Piggyback, respectively. And we've waited just over a month since the first volume of Season 4. There was a lot of big cliffhangers, there was a lot of big reveals about Vecna, about the Upside Down, all the characters spread out all over the world. We had characters in Hawkins, obviously. We had Joyce and Harbour in Russia. We had the other kids sort of on the road, on the way, 11 in the bunker somewhere in Nevada. All that stuff. Was super excited to check out these last two episodes. Obviously, full spoilers for these last two episodes. You've been warned. I'm going to get into it. And I have no idea how I'm actually going to talk about this because there was so many simultaneous things going on, particularly in the finale, that you had just, and Stranger Things always does this to an extent where everything kind of starts to come together. Kind of breaking from the norm a little bit. They don't all kind of actually meet physically again until after everything goes down. It's kind of the epilogue portion and also the season 5 setup portion. But the big thing that I guess I want to start with here is that they kind of lose. Obviously, they do hurt Vecna. The plan to get to Vecna is pretty fun. It's a well thought out plan from a TV writing point of view. A lot of characters doing some interesting stuff. But they kind of lose because ultimately, in fact, we pull, I guess, spoilers for season 1 of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm getting it in early in this video. But they kind of pull a season 1 Buffy thing here where technically the fourth person, because they find out that Vecna needs to kill 4 people, which creates 4 rifts, and that will weaken the entire town, and it'll create a giant opening so that the Upside Down can start to come into the real world. And Max, geez, I mean, technically she's not dead, and I suspect that means that we'll have a glorious reunion with her next season. But seeing her, like, her arms and legs being broken, and for a moment where you think she has died, and she's saying, I can't see anything, she looks blind, she can't feel anything, and then Lucas is crying, holding her in his arms, and it is devastating. And they did such a good job of making you care and worry about the fact that she might die earlier this season, that this is painful. And then 11 basically gives her sort of the defibrillator treatment with her mind. That's how I read it. Is she's not like she can just magically heal people, but I took that as like she literally is restarting her heart. Later, when they're in the hospital, Lucas says the doctor said somehow her heart restarted, and they can't explain why. And that kind of like filled it in. It's like, oh, that's what 11 did. She literally just with her mind started to pump her heart to get her going again. But she's in a coma, and the big thing is that she goes into the dark void, whatever you want to call it, and Max isn't there. She can't find her. And she's done this with her mother before, who's not in a coma per se, but similar enough. Which begs the question, where is Max? Like, we know where her body is, but where is her mind? Where is she right now? Has she been held prisoner by Vecna? Is somehow Vecna taking her back? Are we still calling him Vecna? Number 1 Henry? Who knows? I mean, that was a running joke in these episodes. There's so much to talk about. Holy shit. I jumped to Max because it was probably the most shocking moment, was like her arms and legs breaking, and I'm like, oh god, they have to save her. She'll be in a lot of casts, but that's okay. They have to save her. It's so hard to dive into this because there's so much to talk about and so many great character moments. And obviously my opinion here is overall very, very, very positive. There's not a lot I'm going to critique. There's maybe one thing that I'll maybe take a little bit of a criticism at, but I don't, for the most part, this was enthralling. It was exciting. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat for all of the finale, which was 2 hours and 20 something minutes long. Episode 8 was also really good. Episode 8 was a lot of setup, and it was the team in Hawkins forming their plan, and realizing from everything that Nancy saw. In fact, the first thing I'll say is there was a little bit more where Vecna shows her just a little bit more before she leaves, or before he lets her go, I should say. I realized that some people might ask the question, why wouldn't he just kill Nancy? There's actually a really easy answer for this. In fact, there's two answers for this. The first one, though, which is the more ironclad one, is quite simply Nancy was in the Upside Down when he was doing this. And the whole point of what he's doing later is that he needs to kill people in the real world to make the gates. So, I mean, he could kill her, but it wouldn't accomplish the plan. So it wouldn't count as the fourth kill regardless. Secondly, he says outright to 11 later on that he wants her to watch, and he says to Nancy, you know, tell this to 11, tell her, show her what tell her what I'm showing you is going to happen. You know, I think that's him trying to lure 11 in. Now, obviously, it turns out he doesn't need to do that because Nancy's A, not going to speak to her, and B, 11 is going to be on her way anyway because she already knows that people need help. But those are pretty strong reasons, especially the first one, I think. So I have no problems with that, certainly. So yeah, they get back out into the real world and they're talking about what he's going to do. And Nancy's seen the vision of the giant rips happening in the town, like tearing apart some of the streets in Hawkins. And they're like, we have to do something about this. She wants to go back in the Upside Down and kill him. And this had one of the details that I love about this show is when they think of something that makes sense based on what we already know. So the characters are smart, and it's smart in the sense that it does actually work with what we've seen before. One of the things I actually forgot to bring up in the review for the last batch of episodes, I thought of it while I was watching, and then I remembered about it after I recorded, was... and I talked about most things that I need to in that review, but one of the minor points that I didn't mention, I put a comment on the video. I pinned a comment because I really wanted to put it out there. But I was thinking back to when 11 went into Billy's mind in season 3 to try and find him or find where the main flare was, and how that was basically a big foreshadowing of what Vecna does. So this was her getting into a good memory, and Vecna's alternatively getting into these bad memories. So that was like further set up the idea that Vecna's using the same power set as she is. But where was I going with this? Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So we know that, right? And Dustin realizes, hey, we know 11's strengths, but we also know her weaknesses. If she's got the same powers, then that gives us some, do's and don'ts. It's like if you're going to fight Zod, if you know Superman's weak to kryptonite, then so is Zod. And there was actually Superman references a couple of times in this in these two episodes. But Elle's like watching this plan. When she realizes that her friends are in trouble, she intentionally goes to find them in the void and watches this plan unfold. And it's like, yeah, so whenever Elle would go and find someone, or when she went into Billy's mind, her body's sitting there kind of vulnerable, right? And obviously she tends not to do it in dangerous situations. Good people are around her, whatever. But if she's like that, then it means Vecna's body is also somewhere, right? And they pretty much know where he hangs out. They know it's going to be that attic in the house. So it's like, okay, we can come up with a plan. We can distract him. We can use someone to bait him. It's like, okay, who's next? And Max is like, he's still after me. I can just, I can be the bait. And no one feels particularly comfortable about it, but especially Lucas. But this is the way to go. And they're going to get weapons. They're going to, use lights to signal between the different dimensions. All of it just made sense based on what has been established in the series up until this point. And so the second he started talking about, okay, what's a weakness we can exploit because we know how 11's powers work, I was like, yes, I love this shit. I live for this shit. This is the sort of writing that I really get into. Mechanics that are set up and then used intelligently by the characters. I'm all for it. So that group stuff for the rest of the episode, by and large, is they still a Winnebago, or an RV, or whatever you call the damn thing. I don't know if there's a difference between a Winnebago and an RV, but I don't know what it is if there is one. And they go to a big, gun and sporting goods store that's outside of town, and there's a couple of fun bits here. With obviously some of the jocks are there. Jason's there, and he has a sort of intense moment with Nancy. Luckily, he doesn't see the others. They get away in time. But there's a good bit of tension. Robin sees the girl she's into with her boyfriend, which makes her feel, kind of shitty. The fact I mean, both presumed gay characters in this episode have a moment. This is definitely the lesser of the two, but it's still like a decent little moment. And Steve try to be the friend and all that in there. I mean, obviously there is definitely like a moment I thought where I'm like, wait, these characters are barely out of high school. They're just about to go to college, and they can all go into a gun store and just buy a gun. Nancy buys a shotgun like it's nothing. Alien to me. Alien. Yeah, less of that world, please. Thank you. But the context of the show, they need it, and they get out. And they get some knives. They get some gasoline and or whatever. So yeah, like there's a lot of setup here. They're making their weapons. They have some heart to hearts. Like Robin and Steve. Robin's worried that they might not make it out of this one. But there's a good couple of moments with Steve and Eddie. I thought here where they're making their fancy shields and they're kind of like, Eddie starts tackling them a little bit in a sort of fun way, and it kind of sets up that they get this bond, and it kind of reiterates back to the first episode where what they were like with each other, which really sets you up for Eddie's tragic death when he refuses to run away this time. And Dustin, bless him, tries to get there to help him, but can't. He just gets there to hold him in his arms as he's dying. Someone had to die, and it really felt like they were doing two deaths like back to back, which really, because the death, not quite the death theme, although there is a death theme in the show, but it was the Moby track from the end of season 1. They brought that back, which I appreciate they're doing that actually, because the end of season 3 brought back the cover of Heroes, the Peter Gabriel version of Heroes. I actually really like that they're doing that, and that certain songs will come back when relevant. I mean, obviously, Round Up That Hill played again at one point during the episode, not counting whenever you overhear it from Maxie's headphones. But like these ones where they're bringing one back from like a prior season, like so it's been a while, and it feels like kind of a notable deal that they're bringing it back. It kind of adds a little bit of weight because you kind of associate it to that first time you heard it, and then it kind of like makes this connection through the sound, which I really like. I like that way more than like a direct reference to something. Not that a direct reference to something isn't always bad. Like sometimes it's great, it depending on how it's used and the restraint and how often you do it. But something about using music to like tie something back to an earlier related sequence, I really like. It's just always been something I've been fond of, especially when you go a long time without it. I'm a sucker for when they bring back like an old theme like really late on in a series. I'm thinking there's a great example in the final season of Angel where they bring back the theme that played in a really big episode in season 1, and it was never used after that season 1 episode really until like the penultimate episode of the entire show, and it really felt like it hit hard because of that. And not everyone's going to remember it, but for the nerds that do, it's a big moment. And even if not, it's a good piece of music, so whatever. But anyway, so they're setting up and they're getting ready to go in the Upside Down. Robin's got a beret on. It's it's all really good, solid stuff. Nancy and Steve have a couple of heart-to-hearts on the way. Steve talking about how he's dreaming of having kids, maybe 6 of them. And Nancy thinks that's ridiculous, and I did kind of appreciate. He's like, I've had some practice. The idea that he's used to wrangling at least 4 or 5 kids at this point has made him give him a taste for the father life. It's quite funny. So and these are the sort of moments where like, oh, they're going to kill Steve. He's having these heart to hearts with characters, especially when he actually says to Nancy in the finale that like she was also in that dream, like she's the wife in that scenario. It kind of felt like, oh god, are they going to kill him? Because you give someone a heart to heart like this, you give someone a big moment, and they do it with Max and Lucas. When they're not talking in the house, they're just writing notes, because like obviously once they start speaking, Vecna will be able to hear them. So they're just having a nice moment, and he asks her to go to the movies, and she draws a picture that's basically says yes, and it's a sweet moment. And then it's that sort of moment where I go, oh no, they might kill her now, or they might kill Lucas, because they'll give her this happy moment or they give him this happy moment before they do it. It's TV writing. But that's the thing, they did it with so many characters that unless it was going to be an absolute bloodbath, it did leave it quite unpredictable as to who was actually going to die. So yeah, I'm just it's so hard to like put everything together. I'm just trying to I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss anything with this group of characters that I really want to talk about from the first of the 2 episodes. The stuff with 11, of course. Brenner's a piece of shit. He like, Owen's like, no, like, she's making this choice. This is not a prison. This is her choice if she wants to go back now, if they're in danger. And we've heard from the other characters that like one more kill is all it's going to take. Like the time is ticking away here. We got to go. And Brenner, the piece of shit, gets the guards to lock up Owens and tries to trap 11 there. And I don't have too much that I'm going to say about all this. Obviously it was great seeing her lift the tank at the start of the episode, but when everything goes down and then the soldiers get there and they're killing everyone in the base, and Brenner sneaks her out the back when he's like, because she fights back and tries to leave, and he drugs her and she almost kills him, but the sedative kicks in time to put her down. When she's taken outside and the helicopter's there and it takes some shots and it hits Brenner, obviously we get the great big action set piece of her taking down the helicopter and like slamming it down. The collar she's wearing, I think, is just something that inhibits pain to keep her in line. Clearly it's not inhibiting her powers. I mean, there's no way that's just a mistake in the scene. I don't remember specifically what them talking about the collar back in earlier seasons, but I mean, it seems pretty clear that that's what it is. And it's a big glorious thing. Obviously the pizza van's getting there just in time. You get a great big slow motion shot of the thing going down. It's all very spectacular. You can feel that ridiculous $30 million per episode budget kicking in. But I do love the final moment with Brenner. And I think I loved it for the restraint, because I think as she was kneeling down next to him as he was dying, because he pops the collar off her. And he starts saying, and he's sort of reiterating things he said earlier in the episode. I did this all for you. I love you. You're my family. I only had your best intentions at heart. I need you to understand that. And as he's saying this, as a viewer, like I'm not having restraint in my head, because I'm thinking, oh, just tell him, no, my father's name is Jim Hopper, or something to that effect. Like really rub it in. But absolutely do not say you understand. Do not give him that closure, because he does not deserve it. He is a monster, as she says later on. And they showed a great restraint by having her just not say anything except goodbye. And I thought it was better than what I had in my head, because sometimes they'll do something in a movie or TV show, and sometimes I just won't have any ideas and I'll be like wowed by it, or sometimes I'll have expectations and what they'll do is good, but it's maybe not up to what I had in my head. This is the perfect scenario where I had something in my head that would have worked and been cool. What they did was better, in that her having the restraint to just not say anything except goodbye is more powerful, arguably, than actually sort of like intentionally rubbing something in. Like, there's another father in my life and he's better than you. That's like maybe more on the petty side, although in the moment he deserves it, certainly. But it's also very representative of how she feels about Brenner, because it is more complex than just, I hate you, you're a monster. She did grow up with them for a lot of her young life. Her feelings towards him are very complicated. The fact that she's still calling him Papa, shows that there's a complicated relationship there. It's, I think the idea that she's still going to say goodbye, and that's something she still needs for her, but she's not going to, like, say she understands and give him that closure. He has not deserved that closure. So I thought it was a bit more restrained, but also a bit more nuanced than what I had in my head, which was like, rub it in, rub it in, LL, rub it in, the Hopper's better. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that greatly. And obviously they ride off in the van, and neatly Elle brought the helicopter down and all the other vehicles, so the military dudes couldn't just follow, which was, I don't know if that was an intentional ploy on her part or just a nice big landing zone to put it down on, but it was cool. So yeah, and then obviously the guys in the van, like, I need to talk about the painting and the conversation between Will and Mike. Obviously, Jonathan sort of notices some of the emotion that's on display, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Mike's upset. He's worried that for 11, but he's also worried that she won't need him because she is this great superhero. She's special. She's all these things, and that one day she might not need him. He's feeling a little bit insecure. And Will, probably, I'm going to say it, this is Will's best scene in the entire show. Because Will as a character, he was kind of a plot device. He was the guy that needed to be saved in season 1. In season 2, he ended up being the spy thing. So again, very plot, mechanical sort of character rather than being someone that we necessarily get to know and care about. In season 3, he didn't have a whole lot to do, and he felt kind of sidelined. He felt kind of like the one that was just kind of there for a lot of the time, other than just a couple of times going, oh, I feel it in the back of my neck. Other than that, like, that was basically him. And it's just been kind of this ongoing thing with Will. He's always just kind of felt a little bit out of place since he came back, because we got to know all these characters when he was missing. And I think, obviously, they've been hinting at the fact that he's gay, maybe even hinting that he has feelings for Mike. Obviously, these 2 episodes, I think, solidify all that. He never says it. He never actually comes out and says it, but I think it's obviously, it's about 99.9999% at this point. But this scene where he, as a good friend, genuinely wanting to make Mike feel better and like reassure him, he pulls out this painting that he's done of like the party, right? Their characters fighting a monster, a dragon or whatever, and says that Elle asked him to do this. Elle commissioned it effectively, and he explains that you're up front because you're kind of the leader, and you've got a heart in your shield because you're the heart, and you keep everyone together. And says that that's what you are for her, and you're always and it's very clear as he's talking about this that he's also he's not just talking about how Elle feels about him, he's also talking about how he feels about him. This is this idea that he's always going to need Mike, and and the fact that he turns around and cries at the end of this and doesn't let Mike see that is a little heartbreaking. This is, like I say, it's easily, I think, this character's best moment in the entire show up until this point. It's hard not to get drawn into it. The music in the scene is very good as well. It is very effective for Mike, and that he does actually make him feel better and does sort of reassure him. And it's and obviously it's this conflicting thing for Will, because obviously he's like sort of giving advice and strengthening this relationship he has with someone else. And obviously from Will's perspective, he probably knows that Mike's not gay, so like what he feels can never really be fulfilled with him. But it'll be interesting to see in the future if this is something that does eventually get discussed between them more openly. Certainly Jonathan gets close. I think Jonathan knows. I think I'll just skip ahead and talk about this now. But the scene where Jonathan tries to get him to open up and not force him, just basically clear that he can tell him anything and he'll never look at him differently. It does definitely sound like he knows what's going on. Like he understands on some level what secret Will's hiding, and when he's ready to talk about it, he'll be there for him. And I thought that was a good scene as well, and it was easily Jonathan's best scene of the season. Like if I had one disappointment about these 2 episodes is that Argyle's still alive. Although I'll give them points because I noticed in the credits that the guy working at the second pizza place in Nevada was credited as Argyle 2.0. That was slightly amusing. It's slightly amusing. I'll give them that. So, but I had to mention that because the performances were really good in the scene. It kind of made like this group of characters definitely had the least to do in the season, and it felt like the first big real emotional thing between them, at least since Elle separated from them. And I was glad that they got some good moments in the 2 episodes because it really gave them something to chew on, which was nice. And Mike obviously has a really big moment in the next episode where he gives Elle the strength to fight back as he finally admits that he loves her to her. And I think I kind of like that we already heard him say it by accident last season, because it meant that there was no bullshit here. It meant that we know he means it because he said it in kind of this, way where he didn't mean to blurt it out. He just does. So there's no like, oh, he's just saying this to give her the pep talk or any, there's none of that doubt in your head. That it's just pure. He means it, and and she needed something to trigger the strength to actually get out of the, because she's losing the fight at that point. So yeah, that's that stuff. What else was in was in that penultimate episode? Well, the characters that I talked about. Oh, Joyce and Harper. Yeah, in Russia. Good. Yeah, good. Like, I think definitely all the best stuff with Joyce and Harper has been these last 2 episodes. But if I do have my one critique that I was going to get to, is that I don't think it ever succeeded in feeling essential to everything else. And that's something that all the seasons of Stranger Things typically do really well, is everything kind of comes together at the end. And they kind of like sort of like present the idea that it might in the in the at least the finale or towards the end of the penultimate. So I can't remember where some of the scenes take place. But the idea that if they can weaken the monsters, because when they're leaving the prison, there's they see the particles swirling about. They see the Demogorgons and the big test tube things, which is very last area of Resident Evil 1, 2, or 3. You get the big 3 actually. 3 doesn't have a lab area. Well, 3 has a couple in the hospital, but yeah, like 1 and 2 both end in labs where they're doing all the experiments. So it gave me some solid Resident Evil vibes, which I'm happy about. So they see all this stuff, they get out, they go back to that church with all the supplies. The shithead pilot, Yuri, was that his name? He's stalling, he's not doing stuff. And Hopper and Joyce have some heart to hearts. They even kiss. It's very sweet. Their chemistry together gives these characters some life, especially Hopper, because he's been so miserable all season. And I understand why, but this is definitely just immediately like cool and better. And they're wearing Hulk Hogan t-shirts because time period, and that's what Yuri had, because it's American. So yeah, all this stuff was pretty good. Obviously the even better stuff was in the finale, but like immediately there was a better vibe to it. But they present the idea that if they can weaken part of the hive mind, because since they know from the phone call with secret agent lady who we've been seeing with Owens, that the kids are fighting some monster in Hawkins. They know that they're having to fight for their lives and do something, so they want to try and help. They want to try and help in any way they can. And it really quickly established in the penultimate episode, or the start of the finale, that there's no time to get back to help, like in person. They have to help from here. And same with Elle and the others as well. That ends up being the whole piggyback thing in the last episode. But ultimately doesn't seem to have that much effect on the actual fight going on with everyone else. There's some cool stuff that happens within the prison when they sneak back in to try and take on the monsters, but it doesn't seem to actually have that much effect on the other stuff. Like, all of the weakening seems to come from what Elle's doing in the final episode rather than what Hopper and Joyce and Murray are doing. But there's fun stuff to be had in it, though, so it's not much of a big deal. But when you look at the season as a whole and you think about how this prison plot and like them going after Hopper, like it is just a separate plot about going to get Hopper, pretty much. So, and maybe there'll be some stuff from the Russian side of things that comes up again in the final season, but at least for now it feels quite separate. Before I move on to exclusively talking about the last episode, I do have to also love the Michael Myers mask, the shape mask coming back. So this was a neat thing. Eddie asks Max if she has any bandanas or ski masks, and the only thing she has is the Michael Myers mask, which we know she has because she wore it for Halloween in season 2. That was a wonderful callback. It was a great Halloween reference, actually. After Nancy shoots Vecna in the finale, and they get outside and he's not there. It's very similar to Halloween, where Michael shot off the edge of the balcony, and then when Loomis looks down, he's not there. So definitely doing some, obviously there's a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street references this season. This was some quality Halloween referencing, which I appreciate. Yeah, like the plan, it's got all these multi-layers. The group in Hawkins has to split into a few groups. You have Max is going to be the bait, so she's with Lucas and Erica at the house, the spooky house. and they're going to be doing their part of the plan there. Everyone else goes into the Upside Down. They gear up. I love that Robin had a beret on. They are going. Eddie and Dustin are going to distract the bats that are swarming the house, and then Robin, Steve, and Nancy are going to go into the belly of the beast and take out Vecna while this is going on. And they don't know that help's coming from Elle, and Elle's like determined to get back there, and they can't get a flight. They can't get anything. So their plan is to make a sensory deprivation tank. It ends up Argyle comes up with the plan to go to the chain of restaurant that he works for, but to go to the Nevada one, and they get in there, and Mike and Elle have a little heart to heart as well before things all kick off, which is sweet. There's nothing super specific that I have to say about it, really. I don't think, but it was a nice moment, and it was nice to see Mike be likable again for a little bit, because sometimes he's not, sometimes he's a bit of a prick, but it's the stat that kind of that leads into the heart to heart with Jonathan but so she's going to go into the deprivation tank, and the idea is that she can find Max and go into her head like she did with Billy last season, which is the exact same thing Vecna does, but because Vecna's also in Max's head, she can fight him in there. So this was a very inventive way of getting her into the fight from a distance, and it doesn't feel like it betrays a damn thing that's been set up. It completely makes sense with the logic that they have set up in all of their mythology and the rules of her powers over the past 3 seasons, and what they've set up with Vecna this season. It actually works. It makes sense. So that was super exciting when they were putting these pieces together, and the plan is just like, there's so many layers to it, and I think I was almost daunted. It was almost daunting to talk about it, because normally what I'll do when I'm talking about an episode of TV is I'll take each plot thread and talk about it one at a time, because it's easier to kind of remember most of the details and do it that way. With this, it was cut, all of it like affects each other, and it was cutting around from Eddie and Dustin to Max to Lucas and Erica, and the jocks are showing up at the house because some guy sees Erica there, and then it cuts to Hopper and Joyce, and then it cuts back to Elle inside the dream, and then it cuts to Mike and that. Like, it was cutting around so much. So this is going to be a mishmash of like what went down, and there's points where certain characters are kind of sidelined for a little bit, like the trio going to the house get caught in the vines for quite a while until Elle's fighting Vecna, and then they get released. But there's quite a while where they're just kind of like up against the wall and they're not doing much until they get a proper chance. But yeah, like there's so many like moments here, like Eddie playing guitar and just doing something really, it looks like a metal like album, and the Upside Down to like lure the bats away. Super. Just a fun moment, again, making use of music and the actual core of the show is cool. You have like the actual kind of slow motion of like them throwing the Molotovs at Vecna, with Nancy like going up with the shotgun, the sawed-off shotgun, might I add, and that felt really cathartic, even though ultimately he disappears, and it was like, oh no, he's not done this season. And it makes sense because we find out that he is maybe even a bigger deal to the mythology than we even knew before. We get more of what happened when he arrived in the Upside Down. When Elle shows up, and he's about to get Max. Max is kind of trying to hide in a good memory, and she's at the school dance from the end of season 2, which is all cool stuff. Elle's trying to find her in her head, and she's in like this earlier memory where she's skateboarding as a younger kid. But she shows up in the nick of time to save her. And it's actually really sweet when Max is like, wait, are you real? And she kind of like, touches her face. It was a very like season 1L moment. And I don't know if that's because her head's shaved right now, so she looks obviously more like season 1L. But it was just a very kind of like the way she reacted to being like having her face squeezed to make sure she was real was just really sweet. But she has this big fight. She kind of kicks Vecna's ass for a bit, but then Vecna is like, hey, I've been absorbing power from creatures in here for years now, and like goes to his lair, that lair we saw from episode 4, and ties up Max, ties up Elle. He's winning the fight, and that's when Mike has to give the big pep talk. She can hear him say, "I love you," and it'll always be there. Yada yada yada. So all good stuff. It is very exhilarating, and it was hard not to kind of like get caught up in some of the emotion of some of this stuff that was all going. And part of that's because they've just done such a good job of setting up all the characters that it was hard not to get really into some of it. I think, the scene with Will and Mike in episode 8 was really good. Lucas holding Max after she was, had all her limbs broken and it was blind. Like that stuff, it was hard not to get a little teary-eyed at some of it. But yeah, this backstory stuff Vecna talks about when he arrived here, and we get the reveal that he at the very least shaped the Mind Flayer, if not kind of created what we think of as the Mind Flayer. And one of the things I was speculating in the last batch of reviews was the idea that, was the Upside Down always a mimic of our world? Is that something that Vecna did? Or was that something that happened in an instant when it became connected to our world, when Elle opened the door right at the start of season 1? Because everything we see in this Upside Down with Vecna here, and from like 2 episodes ago, it doesn't look like there's like buildings, it doesn't look like there's trees or anything that's like based on our world. It just looks like rock, it looks like an alien planet. But he comes across the spores, or the shadow, he calls it, swirling around in this big mass, and he gives it shape, and it cuts to him as a kid, like actually drawing out what we would then think of, from season 2 we've known this shape as the Mind Flayer, and the idea that he created this. And it does kind of link up in some way why the Mind Flayer was so obsessed with coming for Elle specifically, that it wanted Elle to open a gate. It wanted through, because this entire time Vecna has wanted through so that he could be this predator. He wants to kill things. He wants to kill everything, basically. And what he's been doing this season has kind of been like this sort of plan B. Because the Elle closed the gate at the end of season 2. I suppose season 3 as well. But like it cuts back to Billy saying, we've been building this. It's all been for you. So that all kind of links up. I'm still a little bit skeptical if he is in outright control of the Mind Flayer. I'll be curious to see a bit more of that sort of explored in season 5, because obviously the characters assumed that the Mind Flayer was in charge, and Vecna's he's lieutenant, like his right hand, and this kind of makes it sound like, no, it's actually Vecna who's behind everything, and he created the Mind Flayer. It does beg the question, where did the other monsters come from? The Demogorgons, the bats, all that sort of stuff. Was that his creation too? Were they already naturally there? Were they already kind of a hive mind with this? Because, the actual particles were there. They already existed. He just gave it a shape and maybe kind of a target and an intention. Or is this something where Vecna's in over his head and he thinks he's in control and he thinks he's the one driving all this, but maybe the Mind Flayer is its own thing and will eventually kind of like fight back and revolt or something? Or maybe it is just exactly what Vecna says. That's possible. There's a lot of potential with this, but this, like, I think a lot of us, knowing this was the penultimate season, kind of expected that maybe there'd be some big, like, oh shit cliffhanger. And sure enough, like, obviously we do get some big setup for season 5, and there's about 30 to 40 minutes of just pure like epilogue, and it's when everyone finally gets to Hawkins and all that stuff. Before I get to that, I suppose I should mention the Joyce and Hopper stuff. I mean, it's them. It kind of harkens back to season 2 stuff when they're trapped in the lab with the cameras, and they're trying to lure the Demogorgons into like the main area because it's designed to hold the monsters, and they've got a flamethrower from the stash of weapons and stuff, and it's like, okay, all right, this is all fun stuff, and it's more condensed in season 2, but it's intentionally calling back because it's trying to, it's making Joyce scared that Hopper's going to die just like Bob did, and it's kind of neatly tying back to that by kind of having a similar situation. And Hopper's at one point holding a Demogorgon's mouth shut as best he can, but he's about to die, and Joyce saves him. Murray burns all the monsters, but one of them doesn't quite die. And we end up with this bit where everything's going down and it feels like Elle's winning the fight when she's fighting back, I think this is when Running Up the Hill's playing again, and Hopper in slow motion fights a Demogorgon with a sword. But admittedly, I think you have to, acknowledge that the Demogorgon he's fighting is heavily damaged. He's been completely set on fire. It's just still alive. So I can see some people complaining that this is just too much. Like Hopper is just too good against this Demogorgon. But I'm willing to accept that the Demogorgon's heavily injured from the fire, and that's why it's a bit more of a fair fight than it would normally be with just one man and a sword versus a Demogorgon. Like it made for such a cool moment with them decapitating it and cutting off the arm and stuff. Like I was having too much fun to sit and nitpick at this potentially being too powerful for a character to be. But I mean, your mileage may vary on that, I guess. So so you have all that stuff. No doubt of forgotten moments, because there's so much when all the plans going on and coming together. But yeah, Vecna's not there, and the tears happen. Obviously Elle, I think, do you know what, the moment that really broke me when Max was dying is when it cut to the void and Elle was sitting next to them, also by her side while she's dying. That was the moment that really hit me. It was emotional enough with Lucas, of course, but he was fighting Jason before, and he saw her floating, and that gives him the strength to fight back. Which, by the way, poor Jason gets ripped in half. I mean, he's a dickhead, but that was a brutal death, because the tear happens throughout the attic from where the death of Max happens, and it just rips his body in half. It's quite gnarly, but it's when it cuts to 11 and the void being there as well that it got me a little emotional. I'm not gonna lie. Because there was so much of her looking at the memory, the happy memories, and so much of it was with them as friends, and it kind of plays upon that afterwards when she finds the bottle when they were playing the spin the bottle game, where they were looking for different people in the void from season 3, these happy memories. But yeah, we get these tears going through the town. It's proper apocalyptic. Dare I say it's a hellmouth opening in the town. And not much happens other than the quake. Obviously, they say afterwards 22 people died. We skip 2 days later. And clearly that's because Vecna's hurt. Because that's the thing. Will says that. He can still sense him. He can sense that this Vecna's still alive. And he's hurt, but he's going to come. And that's presumably why it doesn't start happening until the very end of the episode, where we properly see the Upside Down starting to infect the real world with the ash and the fire and the red light and the cloud and all the rest of it, which makes for a big, huge ending. But obviously, there's so much excitement in the last 30 minutes, seeing the characters reunite, the van showing up, even Mike with his mother's kind of sweet, to be honest. But the other characters reuniting's all very nice. It's really sweet to see Dustin get to hug Mike and Elle, and they go to the hospital where Max is, and it's fascinating that Elle looks in the void for Max and she's not there. I already brought that up, but it was such an intriguing point, especially when it shows you a little bit later on that she just couldn't find her, and that's really intriguing. It's okay, where's her soul, effectively? Where's her mind? So all of this was just a very invigorating, very culmination heavy, satisfying finale. And it's very impressive because it has to also be this opener for next season, because we know this is the penultimate one. So more so than any of the other seasons, this one's going to be left with the more open-ended finish. This is going to have the big cliffhanger. The rest of them, they had little teases at the end, but they mostly tied things off in a neat bow for the endings. Barring just a little mid-credit scene, or barring a little tease of the Upside Down, or whatever it may have been. Here, but seeing Hopper reunite with Elle, and it's going to be him when the car's pulling up. It's going to be the adults finally getting back. It's 2 days later. There's been enough time. It was really sweet to see, them just cracking jokes about them both having the short hair. Was really sweet. Her saying "you look," and then him being not fat. It was just really heartwarming, smile-inducing moments. And honestly, like what got me even more than that was the idea that Mike and Hopper had like a nice like reunion, and like Hopper just grabbed him and hugged him. Just that idea that because he was very aggressive with Hopper for hiding Elle in season 2, and then in season 3 he was kind of this wedge between them because he was sick of them being together. So having them just sort of look at him and being like, oh shit, like you're kind of a man now. I mean, not really, but kind of, in that sense, that once you go through that growth spurt where it's like, okay, I'm going to have to actually start treating you like not like a child anymore, to some extent. So yeah, I all that stuff at the cabin, and the fact that we're back at the cabin and we're renovating that because Elle has to live there again, which I think next season it feels like, because it is the last season, I think they would be wild to not have them be together a little bit more. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I don't think they're going to go off in their separate plot lines. I think that's been part of Stranger Things fabric since season 1. I don't think it's going to change for its final season, but I do expect there to be a bit more together time in the actual thick of the fight. So like, by the time we're having the big finale of everything going down for whatever the final confrontation is going to be, I suspect the characters are going to have largely been together and at least had a chance to like form the plan together, much like the last, much like season 2, I guess, more than any other season. But I suspect that just because it would be weird not to have that, and that may be around the time, because I don't know how long they'll wait to like bring back Max, but like they might like string it out a little bit. But Max is not dead; she will be back. Yeah. So yeah, the fact that was so there was a Supergirl reference where they're trying to make like Argyle, and it's not going to work. But he did say that this is not a Fortress of Solitude when talking about the cabin, which was neat. But I actually really appreciated Mike when he was talking about his insecurities. He's like, I'm not Lois Lane. Like, she's like this ace reporter for the Daily Planet. I'm just a shithead. I actually really appreciate that. Yeah, other stuff towards the end of the episode. Robin does get to meet her potential love interest. I'm going to call her not Molly Ringwald because she's got a bit of a Molly Ringwald and Breakfast Club kind of look to her. I thought, but she mentions not having a boyfriend anymore. And the way she looked at her in the store kind of implied that there was something there, like whether it's because she's bisexual or whatever, or whether it just means that she's not came out yet as gay, or and she's got a boyfriend for those kind of reasons, or whatever it may be. It does seem like there's maybe a hope that this is going to go somewhere. But they just kind of like joke around whilst they're making the sandwiches, because Robin, Dustin, and Steve all start to pitch in, because the town's in chaos. Like, this big earthquake's happened, there's these holes in the ground, 22 people have died. It seems like a lot of the population is fleeing the town. A lot of people are missing, and others are like, they're at the high school gym, which is kind of this refuge center now, and they go to donate stuff for Nancy, and they end up just like hanging around and saying, what can we do to help? And they're sorting out clothes. And this has another emotional scene, actually. This has Dustin's. I feel like a lot of the actors this season got a chance to do big scenes, big acting scenes. Max got a couple, certainly. There's in fact one in this episode where she talks about how she kind of dreamed about Billy dying because she hated him, and that's partly why she feels guilty. That was a great scene from her. Dustin here has a scene with the uncle, Eddie's uncle. Everyone else is still blaming him for the murders. They think he's responsible. And Dustin, when he sees him at the thing putting up the poster, the missing poster, he has to come, obviously not tell him everything, but he's like, I was with him during the earthquake, and he wasn't a bad guy, he was a hero. He gives him his guitar pick, which he's got in a necklace chain, and like his uncle breaks down and starts crying, and it's a very sweet scene. I think for obviously Dustin, we know, cared about Eddie, and he was there for his death, and it's a big deal for him. I think what I really liked about this scene is that the uncle character, he wasn't like an unlikable character before, but he was, he wasn't given much. And I think very quickly here in this scene, the way he replaces the poster that's being graffitied with like satanic stuff, and he puts up a fresh one, and he says to Dustin when he's trying to walk away that, I'm going to keep putting them up until we find them. It's like very quickly, it's like, no, he cares about his nephew. Like, he cares more than maybe what a lot of uncles care about their nephew, to be honest. And like, obviously this prompts Dustin wanting to give him closure. And this even feels like it's kind of like, funnily enough, Barb in a weird way. Like, so much of season 2 for Nancy was wanting to give Barb's parents some closure, and this is what Dustin just does in the moment here. And it's a little bit easier here because he can sort of just say died in the earthquake, so he's got something to cover up a little bit, or not even cover up, it's just that he won't believe all the other shit, so it's an effective moment that I like. He had that scene. Obviously, Will had that great scene with Mike in episode 8. Mike got to make the big love speech. Elle has several scenes with Brenner that she has to act, Millie Bobby Brown has to act her ass off in. Like, most of the kids over the course of this season, but especially these last couple episodes, really get a chance to do something that they never did or never had to do in the early seasons, which is sort of act in a more serious fashion where the emotions are really getting to them and the stakes are higher because because the characters are a little bit older, they're more willing to kill people off now. So it's like, oh no, you're growing up now, so the danger is real and you have to accept that. You have to be more aware of that. And so yeah, like I dug all that stuff, and I'm sure I'm missing some moments here because there's so much to talk about, over the course of just these 2 episodes, because there's so much packed densely into them. And I think the argument about the last episode being this 2 hours 20 minutes behemoth is that could it not have been split into 2? And I think I'm going to stick up for it a little bit and say no, because I think you can argue about maybe the episodes being a little long in places, and maybe it's because they were putting in a little bit too much of some plots that didn't need, some of the subplots that didn't need as much time. But I will say that none of the episodes, like, you could have split this in 2, but the problem there is that it feels like one episode in terms of its content. Like, in terms of like what it's focusing on, like episode 8 is clearly the story of like, the end of Brenner getting out of the lab and like setting up what the plan is in Hawkins, right? It's all the build up to the plan happening. This episode is the plan, and it's how everything else feeds into that, and it's like all the payoff. And then you can't make the epilogue stuff its own episode. That'd be really weird. So if they split it in 2, it would just feel like they'd taken one long episode and split it in 2, and it wouldn't feel like a satisfying ending. Like, when you write for an episode of TV, like, it should feel like a satisfying episode of TV where you have a cliffhanger, sure, for what's coming next, and it's not like done and finished, but you feel like you've had resolution for what was thematically focused on in that episode. And with the last episode, with episode 8, it did have that, with the Brenner stuff especially, and like all the building up to like, okay, we're getting ready to go in for the fight. And many episodes of Stranger Things have had that. The reason why the end of episode 4 with Max was so exceptionally well done is because it not only was it a great sequence, but it was a great ending sequence that the entire episode had been building to. It felt like a complete package. And while this is a really long episode, and maybe you could argue it could be trimmed down a little bit here or there, I think if you just split it in 2 and smack some credits on in the middle of it, I think you could tell it was split in 2. I don't think there's a neat point in the middle that would feel like a dramatic or a natural conclusion to a part 1 of 2, if that makes sense. So I don't think it should be split. Like, maybe trimmed down a little bit, maybe. To be honest, though, like I like when you're so into it, and especially when we've had to wait for these last 2 episodes, I was actually kind of thankful for how long it was. I was getting to the point, like halfway through, where I checked the time left, not because I was waiting for it to end, because I wanted to reassure myself that I had like at least an hour left. Like, oh, I've still got an hour, good. Like, I was reassuring myself, which happens when I really love something like this, especially with TV. I remember doing that with the final episode of the newest season of Twin Peaks and be like, there's only 20 minutes left. Wait, what? How can there only be 20 minutes left? No, there must be more. And like, I was, I'm sort of trying to protect myself from that feeling a little bit. Obviously here there was a lot of epilogue time because it made sense. We wanted to see the characters reunite, and it didn't happen naturally in the fight itself, so obviously we want that. But also you're here to set up season 5. So, at the end, the ash starts coming down, the red starts coming out of the big giant gaping hellmouth, and we have a lot of our characters who are at the cabin standing together on the hill, with 11 front and center, sort of looking out and seeing the dead flower and the line in the field where the sort of the death is kind of creeping, and the other characters reacting around town. And it's like, shit, like there's going to be consequences to this, and the fight is going to be more out in the open. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the parental characters like learn more about what's going on. Like Mike and Nancy's mum, like finally has to become a bit more aware of like what the hell's happening. Certainly she's aware that there's danger in the town now. It's at least there's an earthquake, and there was like killings going on before that. Yeah, like it gets you pumped. I think this ending is pretty perfect for leading into season 5. The only question now is how long is it going to take to get season 5? Of course, this season took a long time because of the pandemic. And it pushed back things considerably. It took 3 years? 2019 was season 3. Yeah, it took 3 years. I don't think the next one's going to take 3 years. I don't even think it'll necessarily take 2. It might take 2. It could be 2 full years. I think it'll be more like a year and a half, just going based on the prior seasons and what the gaps were like for them. But that said, we don't know. I mean, the final season, like these episodes were all longer. Some of them by a lot. So it's not out of the question that season 5 might be like 12 episodes and they're all 90 minutes. It wouldn't surprise me at this point. And if that's the case, then yeah, it may take a bit longer. So, I mean, it's the time they need. Like we just want the ending, and we'll get it in a couple of years. I don't think it'll be 3. I genuinely don't. Even if it's got a lot more in it, I don't think it'll be 3 years. I think 2 is kind of the most I think it'll take. But yeah, it's such a. See, Stranger Things at this point is really perfected, like all the different things going on that all feed into what's happening in the finale. Like everything's built up, and you've got all these characters that are doing their own plans, and they all kind of feed into each other, they intertwine. And they did it a different way this season, with everyone kind of being separate anyway. Obviously, the Joyce and Harper stuff just was kind of still separate ultimately, but it's interesting to see them experimenting with that. And now that Hawkins is this base of like, okay, this shit's going down. Like, I don't feel like Joyce and co are moving back to California. For a start, their house got like bullets all over the place. I'm almost sad we didn't get a scene where someone had to tell them, oh, by the way, a group of soldiers went to your house and tried to kill all your children. Like, that would have been, I just to see the shock in Joyce's face that happened. And if she could see the scene that we saw in episode 4 with them, like that secret agent like giving his life to save the kids by like this great oneer defending them from all the bad guys, like she would probably have a heart attack, quite frankly. So yeah, good stuff. But yeah, it was very exhilarating. Like it has that great feeling that a finale does, and I think Stranger Things, it has really nailed that basically every season. Like, season 1, when I rewatched the show just before season 4 hit, I'd say season 1 feels quite small by comparison, but I think 2, 3, and 4 have all nailed, like, the finale feeling very epic and really big. Like, justifiably big based on all the hype you felt going into it. And they've not felt like letdowns. I'd probably still say season 3's finale is my favourite. And season 3 overall is probably my favourite season still. But I think season 4 swoops in just under it, and I like so much of what they did this season. I love the Elm Street style like murders that Vecna was doing. I did like a lot of the mythology that it added to the show, and sort of like further giving certain things reasons that make sense in the context. I love the characters using what they've learned in prior seasons to inform plans this season, communicating with the lights, the fact that characters are actively going into the upside down now to try and kill something. Even the older teens feel like they're more grown up now, in the sense that they're making these choices, and they're left alone. Like even season 3, eventually the adults came in and said, no, you guys aren't going out of the lab, that's our job because we're the adults. And obviously they all get into trouble anyway with the monsters and stuff up top, because circumstances led to it, but they tried to shield the kids from it. This season, the adults were as far away as they possibly could be, and like the kids had to do this on their own. I mean, including the older teenagers in that as well, but like they had to be the older, the eldest ones in charge, and the other kids had to be a bit more mature than they had been. So on that level, it's really satisfying seeing the stakes rise as the adults as the kids get more mature, and we're allowed to have it be a bit darker, and they have to take more serious consequences of everything they're doing. Yeah, like all that's super satisfying, and I'm sad it's over because I just had like a great 4 hours watching these 2 episodes. But because I had to wait, and because that's all that was left, I was glad it was 4 hours. And maybe not everyone will feel that way, but I do really love the show, and I love how it paces out, how it builds to its big showdowns. So yeah, and I love that none of the showdowns felt like a repeat of prior seasons. Like I say, they've all felt distinct. They've all felt different as well. So I can only begin to imagine how like they're all going to fight the forces of darkness together. But they know Hawkins is where it's all going down, and all these characters in some way are invested in dealing with it. So I think they're going to be more proactive. This season it's not going to be like something's going on in the town and there's a mystery to. I'm sure they'll be investigating some stuff, but like this, unlike I feel like each season has done this a bit more gradually, where the characters know more at the start of the season because of their experience, so they kind of like jump in and realize that something spooky's happening, or they realize that it's upside down related. Next season it feels like, okay, obviously this is all happening, and I'm sure we're going to skip ahead a little bit and be in a new status quo, but like they're going to be looking for things happening. They're going to be looking for solutions. They're going to be looking for how to deal with this, and I can't wait again because it feels like it will be shaken up, and it won't be just doing the exact same thing again, because it's never really done that. It's just felt a little bit different each season. I mean, season 2 probably felt like more like season 1 than any of the other seasons have, because it's been gradually sort of getting different as it goes on. But I think it's really hit a wonderful crescendo. So yeah, at this point, I don't know what more I can say. I'm sure I've forgotten moments and I've forgotten things that I should have talked about, but so much happened and it was cutting around so much, it's impossible to keep it all straight in my head. So I had a great time. I can't wait for season 5. And yeah, here's to another great season of Stranger Things. So by all means, let me know what you thought of the finale and everything in the prior season, or sorry, in the prior episode is what I meant to say. Let me know what you think of season 4. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. It helps me out a lot. Get me on Twitters at mailed_fudge for channel updates, and get me on Twitter at Wibble89. And of course, you can support all the content by going to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and supporting us for as little as $1 per month and help keeping all the content coming. Of course, you can also hit the super thanks button for a one-time donation if you want to do that on YouTube. But any and all help is appreciated and supported, whether that's watching, liking, commenting, whatever. But thank you very much for joining me. It has been a pleasure. I will see you guys sometime in the future for season 5. In the meantime, I would recommend checking out, I've been reviewing The Boys season 3. That's a good show. Better Call Saul's about to come back for the second half of its final season. We have a lot of good discussions about that, me and Connor. We've been reviewing that since season 2, so go check out that. Yeah, okay, there you go. Check out the Male Fuzz Movies, which is where the movie podcasts are that I do with Tim and Tara on horror movies and sci-fi movies, if that's of interest to you. And it might be, given what Stranger Things is. But thank you. I will see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?